Steve Harvey has spent years watching families compete, laugh, argue, and celebrate under the bright lights of the Family Feud stage. He has handled every kind of moment a game show can throw at a host. But on a Tuesday evening in February 2025, something happened that made Steve Harvey do something he had never done before. He stopped being the host, he put down his cards, he walked across that stage, and he shut a man down in front of 200 people. Because what that man was doing to his wife was something Steve refused to let continue for one more second. There was a time when a husband's job was to build his wife up, not tear her down. There was a time when the man standing beside you was supposed to be your biggest supporter, your loudest cheerleader, your safest place. But when Victor Mathis stepped up to the Family Feud podium and started belittling his wife Crystal in front of a live studio audience and millions of viewers, Steve Harvey drew a line, and what he said to that man became one of the most powerful moments ever captured on a game show stage. If you believe that every woman deserves to be treated with respect by the man she married, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. What Steve Harvey does in this story is something every person in America needed to hear. Crystal Mathis was 37 years old. She was from a small town called Laurel, Mississippi, the kind of place where people waved at you from their front porches, even if they did not know your name. Crystal was raised by her grandmother, Ethel Mae Washington, after her parents passed away in a car accident when Crystal was just 4 years old. Ethel Mae was a seamstress who worked out of a small room in the back of her house, hemming pants and taking in dresses for the women in town. She did not make much money, but she kept Crystal fed, clothed, and enrolled in school, and she did it all without ever asking anyone for help. Ethel Mae taught Crystal 3 things that shaped the rest of her life. First, she taught her to sew, and Crystal spent her childhood sitting beside her grandmother's sewing machine, learning how to turn scraps of fabric into something beautiful. Second, she taught her to be kind, no matter what. The world is full of mean people, baby, Ethel Mae would say. Do not add to the pile. And third, she taught Crystal that being quiet did not mean being weak. Some people think because you are soft-spoken you have nothing to say. Let them think that. When the time comes to speak, your words will hit harder because they did not see them coming. Crystal carried those lessons through everything. She graduated high school and got a job at a fabric store in Hattiesburg, eventually working her way up to manage the small alterations department. She was good at it. Customers loved her because she listened to what they wanted and always delivered something better than they expected. She was quiet, yes. She did not like attention. She did not like confrontation. But she was deeply talented and deeply kind, and the people who knew her understood that her gentleness was not a weakness. It was a choice. She met Victor Mathis when she was 25. Victor was 29, a car insurance adjuster who had moved to Hattiesburg from Jackson. He was loud where Crystal was quiet. He was the center of every room where Crystal preferred the edges. He told her on their second date that she needed someone like him to bring her out of her shell. Crystal laughed at the time. She did not realize it was not a joke. It was a preview. They married after a year of dating. The ceremony was small, held at the courthouse because Victor said a big wedding was a waste of money. Crystal had dreamed of getting married in Ethel Mae's backyard, under the magnolia tree where she had played as a child, but she did not push the issue. She told herself it did not matter where you got married. What mattered was who you married. Ethel Mae came to the courthouse and sat in the front row, wearing her best dress and holding a handkerchief she had embroidered with Crystal's initials as a wedding gift. When Crystal looked at her grandmother's face during the ceremony, she thought she saw worry behind the smile, but she told herself she was imagining it. For the first few years, things were manageable. Victor was controlling, but Crystal told herself he was just protective. He criticized the way she cooked, but she told herself he just had high standards. He made jokes about her being too quiet at parties, about her being boring, about how lucky she was that he had chosen her, but Crystal told herself it was just his sense of humor. She had spent her whole life being agreeable, being accommodating, being the person who smoothed things over instead of making waves. And so she absorbed Victor's words like her grandmother's fabric absorbed dye, slowly, deeply, until she could not tell anymore where his opinions ended and her own self-image began. They had 2 children. Their daughter Maya was now 8. Their son Caleb was 6. Crystal loved those children with a fierceness that surprised even her. She poured everything into them. She made their Halloween costumes by hand. She sewed curtains for their bedrooms with fabric she picked out herself. She stayed up late helping Maya practice her spelling words and teaching Caleb how to tie his shoes. She was the kind of mother who made everything feel safe and warm, even when her own life felt neither of those things. Ethel May passed away 2 years before the Family Feud appearance. She was 84. Crystal held her grandmother's hand in the hospital room and promised her that she would be okay. Ethel May, with the last bit of strength she had, squeezed Crystal's hand and whispered, "Baby, you have always been stronger than you think. One day you are going to find that out." Crystal did not understand what she meant at the time. She would understand soon enough. The Family Feud appearance was Victor's idea. He loved being on camera. He loved attention. He saw the show as a stage for his personality, a chance to show off in front of a national audience. Crystal agreed to go because the children were excited about it, and because she hoped, somewhere deep inside, that the experience might bring the family closer together. The team was Victor, Crystal, Victor's brother Darnell, his sister-in-law Keisha, and Crystal's childhood friend Tamika, who had been asked to fill the 5th spot. Tamika had known Crystal since grade school. She knew what Crystal's home life was really like, and she came on the show not to play a game but to be there for her friend, just in case. The Mathis family was matched against the Reeves family from Memphis, Tennessee. The Reeves were a cheerful, close-knit family led by a retired firefighter and his wife of 30 years. The contrast between the 2 families was subtle at first, but became impossible to ignore as the taping progressed. During the introductions, Steve Harvey worked his way down the Mathis family lineup. When he got to Victor and Crystal, Steve asked the standard couple question, "Victor, tell me about your wife." Victor grinned, the kind of grin that was more performance than warmth. "Steve, my wife Crystal is a sweet woman. Real quiet though, she barely talks. I always say I married the only woman in Mississippi who does not have an opinion about anything." He laughed at his own joke. His brother Darnell laughed too. Crystal stood beside him with a small, tight smile. She looked down at her shoes. She did not say anything. The audience gave a polite, uncertain laugh, the kind of laugh that happens when people are not sure whether something is funny or uncomfortable. Steve's eyes moved between Victor and Crystal. He did not laugh. He gave a small nod and moved on to the next introduction, but something had registered on Steve Harvey's face. A flicker of recognition. He had seen this dynamic before. The game began. The first round went normally. The Mathis family won the face-off, and they started working the board. Victor answered first and got his answer on the board. Then it was Crystal's turn. She stepped up to the podium, and Steve asked the question, "Name something a wife wishes her husband would do more often." Crystal thought for a moment and said, "Listen." It was the number 1 answer. 42 points. The audience erupted in applause. Crystal's face lit up. It was possibly the first time all day that she looked genuinely happy. She smiled wide and turned back toward her family lineup, and that was when Victor said it. "Wow, that is the smartest thing she has said all year." He said it loudly, directly into the microphone, with that same performative grin. And then he laughed again, looking at the audience as if expecting them to laugh with him. They did not. The audience went quiet. The kind of quiet that descends when a room full of people collectively realizes they are witnessing something ugly. Crystal's smile disappeared as fast as it had come. She looked down again. Her shoulders pulled inward, the body language of a person making herself smaller. Tamika, standing at the end of the family lineup, clenched her jaw so hard you could see the muscles move. Steve Harvey stared at Victor. He did not say anything immediately. He just looked at him. And the look on Steve's face was the look of a man doing math in his head, adding up everything he had seen since this family walked on stage. The way Victor dominated every conversation, the way Crystal shrank every time he spoke, the way that joke was not really a joke at all. The game continued. but the pattern repeated with sickening consistency. Every time Crystal spoke, Victor had a comment. When she gave an answer that was not on the board, Victor shook his head and muttered, "See, that is why I should have answered." When she hesitated before answering, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Come on, Crystal, it is not brain surgery. Just say something." When the family got a strike on another player's answer, Victor looked at Crystal and said, "At least that was not your fault this time." Each comment was like a small cut. Individually, they might have been dismissed as bad humor, but together, in sequence, they formed a pattern that every person in that studio recognized for what it was. This was a man who diminished his wife as casually as breathing, and he did it with a smile, as if humiliating her was entertainment. Crystal got quieter with every round. Her answers got softer, her confidence visibly drained. She started looking at Victor before she spoke, as if checking whether he would approve of what she was about to say. The audience noticed. The cameras noticed. Steve Harvey noticed. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was the third round. The question on the board was, name something a husband should never say to his wife. The Reeves family was playing the board, and they got 3 strikes. The Matthews family had a chance to steal. Victor stepped up to give the steal answer. He leaned into the podium, looked at Steve with that showman's confidence, and said, "Easy. A husband should never say, 'You are right,' because then she will expect it every time." He turned to the audience with both arms spread wide, waiting for laughter. Dead silence. Not a single person laughed. Not one. But Crystal spoke. For the first time all day, she spoke without being asked. She spoke without looking at Victor for permission. She looked at Steve Harvey, and her voice was small but clear, and what she said landed like a thunderclap in that silent studio. "He says that to me every day." 4 words. That was all. But every person in that building understood what those 4 words meant. They meant that what they were watching was not a performance. It was not a character Victor was playing for the cameras. This was how Crystal lived every single day. The jokes, the belittling, the constant chipping away at her confidence. This was her reality, and she had just, for the first time, said it out loud. Tamika, Crystal's childhood friend, stepped forward from the lineup. Tears were already running down her face. "Crystal, I am right here," she said. "I am right here, baby." The audience murmured. Several women were crying. A man in the second row was staring at Victor with an expression of barely contained anger. The Reeves family across the stage stood with their arms folded, the retired firefighter shaking his head slowly. Steve Harvey had been watching all of this from behind his podium. His jaw was tight. His eyes moved from Victor to Crystal and back again, tracking the damage in real time. Years of hosting had taught Steve to read families within minutes of meeting them, and what he was reading in the Mathis family was not a comedy act. It was a woman being systematically dismantled by the man who was supposed to love her the most. And each joke, each comment, each dismissive laugh was another brick being pulled from the foundation of Crystal's sense of self. The audience could feel it too. The energy in the studio had shifted from fun and lighthearted to tense and uncomfortable. People were fidgeting in their seats. A woman in the front row kept looking at Crystal with an expression of pained recognition, as if she were watching her own story play out on someone else's stage. The Reeves family stood on their side, the retired firefighter's wife wiping her eyes with a tissue she had pulled from her purse. Steve Harvey set his cards down on the podium. He straightened his jacket, and he walked toward the center of the stage with the deliberate pace of a man who had made a decision and was not going to be talked out of it. Steve did not go to Crystal first. He went straight to Victor. He stopped about 4 feet in front of him, close enough that Victor had nowhere to look but directly into Steve Harvey's eyes. The cameras tightened on both men. The studio was so silent you could hear the air conditioning humming above the lights. "Victor," Steve said. His voice was low and controlled, but there was weight behind every syllable, the kind of weight that comes from a man who has lived long enough to know the difference between humor and cruelty. "I need to talk to you right now. Not as a host. Not as a comedian. As a man who has been married, who has failed in marriage, and who learned some things the hardest way possible." Victor shifted on his feet. The grin was still on his face, but it was fading. Steve, come on man, it is just jokes. She knows I am playing. Steve did not blink. Does she? Because I have been watching your wife for the last 45 minutes, and I have not seen a woman who thinks you are playing. I have seen a woman who is shrinking. Every time you open your mouth, she gets smaller. Every joke you make at her expense takes something from her, and you do it with a smile like you do not even notice. But I notice. This audience notices. And I promise you, your children notice. The audience erupted in applause, not polite clapping. Thunderous, emotional, cathartic applause from 200 people who had been waiting for someone to say what they were all thinking. Victor's grin was gone now. His face hardened. Steve, with all due respect, you do not know what goes on in my household. You are right, Steve said immediately. I do not know what goes on in your household, but I know what I just saw on my stage. I saw a woman get the #1 answer, the best answer in the entire survey, and instead of celebrating her, you mocked her. I saw your wife look at you for permission before she opened her mouth. I saw her shoulders fold in every time you spoke, and I just heard her tell me, and 200 people, and however many million people are going to watch this, that you talk to her like that every single day. That is not a joke, Victor. That is a pattern, and patterns like that destroy people. Steve turned slightly, addressing both Victor and the camera. Let me tell you something I learned the hard way, and it cost me 2 marriages to learn it. A real man does not tear his wife down to make himself look tall. A real man builds his wife up because her strength is his strength. When you married that woman, you made a promise to protect her, and protection is not just about keeping her safe from the world. It is about keeping her safe from you, from your words, from your ego, from whatever broken thing inside you makes you think it is acceptable to humiliate the mother of your children for a laugh. The studio was completely still. Steve was not performing. He was not doing a bit. He was speaking from a place of genuine conviction, and every person in that room could feel it. Steve walked over to Crystal. She was standing with Tamika's arm around her, tears running quietly down her face. Steve looked at her with a gentleness that was the exact opposite of everything Victor had shown her that day. Crystal, I want you to hear me. What he does, the comments, the jokes, the way he makes you feel small, that is not love. I do not care what he calls it. That is not love. Love builds. Love encourages. Love makes you feel safe enough to take up space in a room. And you deserve to take up space, Crystal. You deserve to give an answer and have someone cheer for you instead of cutting you down. Crystal's tears came harder, but there was something shifting behind them. Her shoulders, which had been curved inward all day, began to straighten. Tamika squeezed her arm and whispered, "He is right, Crystal. He is telling you what I have been trying to tell you for years." Steve continued, "Your friend Tamika came on this show for you. I can see it. She has been watching you all day with the eyes of someone who loves you and is worried about you. You have people who see you, Crystal. You have people who know your worth, even when the person who is supposed to know it the most cannot be bothered to show it." Crystal wiped her face and looked up at Steve. And then she did something that surprised the entire studio, including herself. She spoke, not the small, permission-seeking voice from earlier, her real voice. The voice Ethel Mae Washington had told her she would find when the time came. "My grandmother raised me," Crystal said. "She was a seamstress. She could take a piece of fabric that nobody wanted and turn it into something beautiful. She taught me how to sew, how to create, how to make something out of nothing. And she told me something before she died. She said I was stronger than I thought. I did not believe her then, but standing here right now, I think I am starting to." She looked at Victor. "I have loved you for 12 years, Victor. I have cooked your meals, raised your children, laughed at your jokes even when they hurt me, and made myself smaller so you could feel bigger. And I am tired. I am so tired of being the punchline. I am a good woman. I am a good mother. And my grandmother would not want me to spend one more day letting anyone make me feel like I am not enough." The audience rose to their feet. The standing ovation shook the studio. People were crying, cheering, and clapping all at once. Tamika was sobbing and holding Crystal so tight it looked like she would never let go. Even Victor's brother Darnell, who had laughed at Victor's jokes earlier, was standing with his arms at his sides, his head down, as if he was ashamed of his own participation. Steve Harvey stood in the middle of that stage with tears running down his face and turned to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, you just watched a woman find her voice on live television. You watched a woman who has been told she is not enough, who has been made the butt of every joke, who has been diminished in her own home, stand up and tell the world who she really is." That is not a game show moment. That is a life-changing moment, and I am grateful I was here to see it. The game was stopped. The producers awarded both families their full prize compensation. The Reeves family patriarch, the retired firefighter, walked across the stage after taping ended and shook Crystal's hand. "Mom," he said, "in 30 years of running into burning buildings, that was the bravest thing I have ever seen." When the episode aired 5 weeks later, it exploded. The clip of Steve confronting Victor was viewed over 100 million times in the first month, making it one of the most watched Family Feud moments of all time. But the clip that resonated even more deeply was Crystal's speech about her grandmother. Women shared it with captions like, "This is for every woman who was made to feel small," and, "When she said she was tired of being the punchline, I felt that in my soul." The clip became a cultural touchstone for conversations about emotional abuse, the kind that does not leave bruises but leaves scars that take years to heal. Crystal returned to Hattiesburg and, for the first time in her married life, made a decision entirely for herself. She enrolled in a small business course at the local community college. Within 3 months, she launched a home-based alterations and custom sewing business, using the skills Ethel May had taught her as a child. She called the business Ethel May's, and the tagline printed on every business card read, "Making something beautiful out of nothing." Orders came in slowly at first, then faster as word spread. Within 6 months, she had a waiting list. Crystal and Victor separated 4 months after the episode aired. Crystal later told a reporter, in the only interview she gave, that leaving was the hardest thing she had ever done, not because she still loved the version of Victor she had married, but because she was terrified of being alone. "My grandmother raised me to be strong," she said, "but strength is not the same as knowing how to be on your own. I had to learn that part from scratch. I am still learning." Victor, to his credit, did not disappear or go on the attack publicly. He posted a single statement online that read, "I watched the episode. I saw what everyone else saw. A man treating his wife like she did not matter. That man was me, and I am ashamed of it. Crystal deserved better. My children deserved better. I do not know yet if I can fix what I broke, but I am in counseling, and I am trying to understand why I became someone who hurt the person I was supposed to protect. I owe Steve Harvey a debt of gratitude for saying to my face what nobody else had the courage to say." Tamika, Crystal's lifelong friend, moved in with Crystal for the first 3 months after the separation to help with the children and the business. She later said in an interview, "I knew Crystal's grandmother. Ethel May was the toughest, kindest woman you would ever meet, and on that stage, I watched Crystal become her grandmother's granddaughter for real. Ethel May told her she was stronger than she thought. She was right. Crystal just needed someone to remind her, and Steve Harvey did that." Steve Harvey talked about the Mathis episode for months afterward. At a women's leadership luncheon, he gave a speech that referenced Crystal directly. "I have been in entertainment for decades. I have made millions of people laugh. But the moment that changed me the most was not a joke. It was a quiet woman on my stage who had been told her whole marriage that she had nothing to spoke, and when she finally spoke, she said more in 30 seconds than most people say in a lifetime. She reminded me that the most powerful thing a voice can do is not make people laugh. It is make people listen." Crystal's business grew steadily. She hired 2 part-time seamstresses. A local boutique started carrying her custom pieces. A regional magazine did a feature on Ethel May's, and the story focused not just on the beautiful clothing, but on the woman behind it and the grandmother whose legacy was woven into every stitch. Orders began coming in from across Mississippi and beyond. Within a year, Ethel May's had become something more than a business. It had become a symbol. Women would come to Crystal's shop, not just for alterations or custom dresses, but because they wanted to sit in the presence of someone who had been through the fire and come out the other side still creating beautiful things. Mental health professionals began using clips from the episode in workshops and training sessions about emotional abuse and coercive control. A psychology professor at a university in Alabama wrote a paper analyzing the dynamic between Victor and Crystal on stage, pointing out the specific patterns of belittlement, public humiliation, and permission-seeking behavior that the cameras had captured. The paper was titled, "The Punchline," and it was widely shared among therapists and counselors who worked with women in controlling relationships. Crystal's story became a teaching tool because it showed what so many women lived with every day, but could rarely name or explain to others. The response from men was also significant. Thousands of men posted on social media after the episode, many of them admitting that they had seen themselves in Victor's behavior. Some shared stories about their own fathers who had belittled their mothers, and how watching the episode had made them realize they were repeating the same patterns. A men's accountability group in Atlanta created a discussion guide based on the episode, using Steve Harvey's words as a framework for conversations about how men speak to the women in their lives. The guide was downloaded over 50,000 times in its first 3 months. Caleb, Crystal's 6-year-old son, did something a few months after the separation that Crystal said changed her forever. He came into her sewing room one evening while she was working on a dress, climbed into her lap, and said, "Mama, you are not boring. You are the best person I know." Crystal realized in that moment that her children had heard everything Victor had ever said about her. They had absorbed it, processed it, and formed their own opinion. And their opinion was the opposite of his. She held Caleb and cried, not from sadness, but from relief that the cycle was breaking. Maya, Crystal's 8-year-old daughter, started learning to sew alongside her mother. Crystal set up a small sewing station next to her own, with a child-sized machine and scraps of colorful fabric. Every evening after homework was done, the two of them would sit side by side, just as Crystal had once sat beside Ethel May, stitching and talking and laughing. Crystal told a friend, "That is the legacy I want to pass down, not the pain. The craft, the strength, the knowledge that you can take the worst thing life gives you and turn it into something beautiful." 1 year after the episode aired, Family Feud invited Crystal back for a special update segment. She walked onto the stage to a standing ovation that lasted over a minute. She was not the same woman who had stood there a year earlier with hunched shoulders and a borrowed smile. She wore a dress she had designed and sewn herself, a deep emerald green with gold stitching that caught the studio lights. Around her neck was her grandmother's embroidered handkerchief, the one Ethel May had given her at the courthouse wedding, now framed in a small pendant. Steve Harvey hugged her and held her at arm's length. "Crystal Mathis," he said, shaking his head with admiration. "Look at you." Crystal smiled, a real smile, wide and unguarded and unapologetic. "Steve, a year ago I stood on this stage and I was afraid to speak. I was afraid of my own voice. You told me I deserved to take up space. I did not believe you then. But I went home, and I started my grandmother's business, and I raised my kids, and I sewed every single day. And somewhere in all of that stitching, I sewed myself back together." Steve pointed at her the way he pointed at a number one answer. "That," he said, "that right there. That is what this show is for. Not the games, not the prizes. For moments like this. For women like you. Crystal, you walked onto my stage broken, and you walked off it whole, and you did it yourself. I just held the microphone." Crystal shook her head gently. "No, Steve. You did more than hold a microphone. You saw me. On a day when I had made myself invisible, you saw me, and you told the world to see me too. I will never forget that." The story of Crystal Mathis, and the day Steve Harvey shut down her husband on national television, became one of the most referenced episodes in the show's history. Not because of the confrontation, not because of the drama, but because of what it revealed about the quiet, invisible damage that cruel words can do inside a marriage, and the extraordinary resilience that lives inside people who have been told their whole lives that they do not matter. Crystal proved that they do, and Ethel May Washington, the seamstress from Laurel, Mississippi, who could turn scraps into something beautiful, was proven right one last time. Her granddaughter was stronger than she ever thought possible. Ethel May's handkerchief, the one she embroidered with Crystal's initials and gave her at the courthouse wedding, now hangs in a small frame beside the front door of Crystal's sewing shop. Every customer who walks in sees it first. And underneath it, in Crystal's own careful handwriting, is a quote from her grandmother that she put up the day the shop opened. It reads, "Some people think because you are soft-spoken, you have nothing to say. Let them think that. When the time comes to speak, your words will hit harder, because they did not see them coming." Crystal said it took her 37 years to understand what her grandmother meant. But when the time came, standing on that Family Feud stage under those bright lights, Crystal spoke, and the whole world heard her. If this story reminded you that words matter, that kindness is never weakness, and that it is never too late to find your voice, do us a favor right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. We bring you the most incredible and emotional Family Feud moments every single week. Real families, real struggles, and real strength. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.